And good evening once again, Eternal Kernels, and welcome to the fourth night of our Eternal Kernel virtual pub crawl here at EKU. Each night this week we have been taking a stroll down memory lane and remembering some of those iconic night spots that helped add to your Eastern experience when you may have been a student here on the Campus Beautiful. We started Monday night in the 60s, the 70s on Tuesday night. Last night was the 1980s, and tonight we're going to feature some of those iconic night spots from the 1990s. So we've got a great lineup of guests for you tonight. We're going to start in our first segment talking about T-Bombs. And we have Kim Billings, who is one of the owners of T-Bombs, and Curt Chapman, who did about everything there was to do at T-Bombs during his time working there. They're going to come on and talk a little bit about that historic night spot in our first segment. And then in segment two, we've got Gabe Uebel, who will be on with us. And Gabe was one of the owners of Tazwells during its run in downtown Richmond. And he'll talk not only about Tazwells, but some of the other night spots that were really alive and doing great in the 1990s. If this is your first night with us, we appreciate you joining us. If you have been with us every night, we especially appreciate that. But we want everyone who is tuning in to be sure to check in tonight so that we know who is tuning in. We're trying to get an idea of what states are represented and how many different folks from around the country are going down this memory lane with us. So if you could, please go to alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl. If you go there, you can register. And while there, you can also check out our one-of-a-kind designer pub crawl t-shirts, the virtual pub crawl t-shirts. These are going to be instant classics and collector's items. They are on sale. Also, you'll have an opportunity to make a donation to the university and help support the mission and the kids who are in school now, making some of the memories that you made when you were a student here, whether that was just a few years ago or maybe a few decades ago. So it's alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl. Go there, please, register, and let us know, check in and let us know that you joined us for tonight's broadcast. Also, I would like to remind everybody, we know that we are only featuring certain bars and certain night spots, and we only have a limited amount of time. We're going to do our best to try to mention as many of the different spots as we can, and we're trying to highlight just a couple of them that were mentioned to us as some of those iconic spots. We probably will do this again, so if we didn't get to your favorite night spot on this go around, we'll definitely try to do that when we do our next round of pub crawl. Also, we want to let folks tonight who are watching on Facebook Live know that we want this to be interactive. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have memories, please post those to the chat there in Facebook Live. And some of those questions we'll try to answer during the segments, or some of the memories, as you can see, they'll pop up on the screen there if you have some things that you'd like to share with your fellow alums that you might remember from some of these night spots. So, you remember T-Bombs. Everybody remembers the patio, the music, the fun. It was a great time, and we're very lucky tonight and very happy to be able to start our broadcast off talking about T-Bombadils. Everybody called it T-Bombs for short, but T-Bombadils, the official name. And I'll introduce our guest tonight for segment one. First up, he was one of the owners of T-Bombs for a long portion of its run in downtown Richmond on First Street. Kim Billings is with us tonight, and Kim is coming to us live from his home. Kim, good evening and welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And our other guest tonight is a gentleman by the name of Curt Chapman. And Curt was a longtime employee of T-Bombs, and I think did a little bit of everything from bartending to music to manager, a little bit of it all. A jack of all trades, a master of none, I guess is what we'll say. Curt, welcome to the show.
Good to be here as well. But I want to make it perfectly clear, I never gave Dave Billings the pleasure of saying that I actually worked for him.
We also, I want to mention both of you guys are EKU alums, so thank you for that. And I believe, Curt, you're even teaching some classes at EKU right now, aren't you?
I am. I recently went back and got my undergrad and my master's degree, and I'm teaching part-time, just adjunct for the school, and going to pick up another class or two next semester. So good part-time job.
Yeah. Well, 3 degrees, I guess you've earned the right to teach now after you've got 3 degrees from EKU. All right, let's start at the beginning here, Kim, and I'm sure you know the history about as well as anybody. let's talk about how Bombadil started and kind of give us the history of the start and how it grew over the years.
Well, my brother Dave, he was in the Air Force, and my dad had the bar on First Street. And when Dave got out of the Air Force,
Uh-oh, Kim's frozen.
he was confused, and
Oh,
my
there
dad
he
had
is.
another bar.
You froze for a second, Kim, but you're back now.
And Dave was working for him, and he kept pushing my dad to let him take that bar. And he had another one on the other end of town. And he finally let him do it. And one of the funny things about it is when he did, Dave got a bunch of college kids to come and paint the front of it. And it looked like Dave's daycare. It was just blue and white. You remember that, Curt? Look.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
And that's how it got started. Was Dave talked my dad into letting him start running it, and he was pretty good at it. He's a good salesman, and pretty much he turned it into what it was. I just sort of hung back.
It was
little brother.
It was always on First Street, right?
Yes.
T-Bombs was.
Yes.
And when your dad owned it, did it have the same name? Was it T-Bombs?
No, it was. At one time, it was Sam's Place, and then he come back, and it was. It had 2 or 3 different names, but Sam's was the 2 names that I remember, because I was the young one.
Yeah. Curt, real quick, why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about what your association with T-Bombs was and how that came to be?
Well, I was one of the early customers in there. As a matter of fact, when first went in there, it was just the one shop. It was like a shotgun bar and had booths down the right side. But I became friends with Dave and then later on with Kim, and they became almost like family to me. I was a musician, traveled around. As a matter of fact, I was in the first band that played at T-Bombs. Mike Thomas and myself and Mike's brother, Jerry, played as a little trio, and sort of went from there. We started playing in there, and that's how I got acquainted with Dave. And then Kim came in as soon as he got out of the Army. And then later on, I would go down and help Dave during the day. We had a thing. We'd go down at night. He would drive down at night. We'd take a cab home. Then I'd go pick him up in the morning and come down, and we'd clean up and that kind of thing.
And through the years, your role changed. You did a little bit of everything there, right?
I watched the kids in front of the bar and the kids in back of the bar. I used to tell people I was the highest priced babysitter in town. But that, and I ran sound down there some. I helped put a sound system in when he opened up a big room, part of the patio. As a matter of fact, the very first patio that he put in was right behind the 2 sections, and it was a gravel lot basically with a fence around it, and we were the first band that played out there as well. So the patio started off small and became a project over the years.
And the patio, obviously, toward the end, especially, the patio was unbelievable. Yeah. Kim, give me some years here, kind of as time as a frame of reference. When did Dave and start to take it over from your father and turn it into T-Bombs? What years?
Probably about 92, and then he just kept growing. T-Bombs just kept growing. It was like Curt said, it was just a bunch of little chairs in there, and we got getting the pool tables in, and the college students started coming up on the First Street, getting away from the dog a little bit, and the dance clubs are coming up for the pool tables and free hot dogs out back, and it just gradually grew and grew, and Dave was real good. I don't know about manager, but a good guy that would market everything. Yes.
Yeah. market and promote. Yeah, and obviously that's a big part of any bar.
Yeah, with that, he was the big marketing thing. I mean, he had that way he could just talk to people when they come in. Sort of like Curt there.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that people always ask, and so I've got to get the story behind it. Where did the name come from? T Bombadils?
Yeah.
Oh, Kim, you keep freezing there. There you
go. Dave and his wife were big token fans, and that's where it started. Is one of the characters out of J.A.R. Tolkien's book, Lord of the Rings, and that's where T-bombs come out of. I don't know what part of the book it came out of, but that's where it came.
Oh, well, Tom Bombadil ran an inn in the woods, and part of all the warring factors, if you've read the book, all the warring factors was welcome in there, but there was no fighting allowed. There was no war allowed to go on inside Tom Bombadil's inn.
And that's the idea of what T-bombs would be, the same thing.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm thinking when they named it that, did they think that it would ever be shortened to T-bombs, or did that just kind of come naturally?
I think it just came, it's easy to say, T-bombs. And everybody just got used to call it T-bombs. Let's go to T-bombs, just like going to the dog or anything else.
Yep.
Curt, you talked a little bit about being one of the first bands or the first band to play live there. One of the things, particularly in the latter years, I know that T-bombs kind of became famous for was the live music. I mean, it really had some great live music out on the patio. A lot of different bands and a lot of different acts coming through there and playing.
We had a very eclectic mix of music. Dave liked all kinds of music. We all did. He would have I played bluegrass in there. I played rock and roll. We had new wave bands come in. We've had several punk bands, hard rock, heavy metal, just many different bands and good bands, good musicians. There's been some really good musicians that's gone on and done better things that have come through there. And actually, even one night we had my old boss, J.D. Crow, come in and played a whole set with us down there, unannounced, of course, but the word got out pretty quick and the patio filled up real quick after that.
I know the Quack was a regular band that played there, and I was there to see them play several times.
They were, Owen Grice was a good friend, and I think Owen is the one that got Dave to let them come in, and of course they had a loyal following and still do, as a matter of fact. They're still playing, and but they played there quite a bit.
When you think back about T-bombs, and obviously it had a kind of a reputation as a fun place to be, what do you think made it kind of stand out and made it different from some of the other places? Because there were obviously a lot of options back then.
I think in a nutshell, as Kim was saying, it was Dave Billings. He would travel around and go to different places, to different parts of the country and even foreign countries, and pick up little things and bring them in and try them out at T-bombs. One thing that comes to mind was the turkey bowling thing that just sort of took off really quick. I think Kim, he was in Cincinnati when he looked or saw that.
Yeah, we used to make pretty recent, quick trips up to Cincinnati to go down by the University of Cincinnati and see what everybody was doing down there to see what he thought would work. We just always did something. He did that more than I did. He just was always trying to find that one thing that will make everybody come up there for a while. Everybody gets tired of stuff eventually. So
he was the first one to bring karaoke, and then put it in my lap, and I'll never forgive him for that. being a musician, you have mixed feelings about karaoke.
I want to talk for a second again about the patio, because that's an element that wasn't there when it first opened. And I can't remember what the circumstances were, but there was actually a physical building next door at the beginning, wasn't there?
There were several buildings. 1890s was down on the end, and then T-Bombs, and then I thought, was it the Army Navy store right next to him, Kim, that your dad or that y'all bought out, and then the city anyway, those buildings collapsed in between 1890s and
that's when we put the middle part in over on the other side of the pool tables, and it was just a good for us. It was the city finally just tore everything down, and then we got it, and that's when we start making the patio bigger with the big stage, and you can get up there and we'd cook and we'd have fraternities come out, and we'd cook them food for the night. They, of course, by then they didn't want any food by the time we'd get it off. But that really expanded T-Bombs, was when we could get farther out on the outside and more people. It cost more for us because you'd have to put 3 or 4 people. They'd try to crawl across the fence to get in and everything. So, but it was fun.
Oh yeah.
Well, and even back then, it may not have been the first patio, but it was one of the first outdoor patios that I remember in Richmond, and it was certainly the biggest.
Yeah. We had a little one at first, and we just kept adding on.
I think it wound up being about the largest one in the central Kentucky area at that time, if I'm not mistaken. Larger than anyone they had in Lexington at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can remember, because if you're able to go to a bar, particularly on their patio, and there's an area where you can enjoy the music, but there's also, the patio is big enough where there's an area, if you want to be away and have a conversation, you could still do that on that patio. It was that big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it depends on who was playing too.
Excellent point. Good point. As we think back to that period, were there any drinks or were there any items that T-Bombs had that you kind of remember as an item that brought people in, or that were specialty items that T-Bombs was known for?
Upside down margaritas, and what was the one, Curt, where the girls come back there and they'd chug them right at the bar?
Oh, you've asked me too quick. I never partook of those kind of things myself.
Yeah. Anyway, it's an upside down.
Yeah. One of the first ones was, I think Diane Long mentioned there, the Baggins Brew.
Yeah.
That was sort of like a hooch kind of thing, if y'all remember that.
Oh yeah, we went out to the pottery place before it closed down, and had a bunch that looked like what was in Lord of the Rings, the buckets they carried around, and you'd load them up. People buy them for $5 for the whole thing, and it was funny to watch them try to drink them when they'd already had several. But
well,
just different things like that was why we tried to keep everything a little new, because everybody gets bored sooner or later. So, but I don't remember too many times that we were empty over the years.
One of the things we tried to do during the week is kind of talk about the entire downtown scene as a whole, and obviously, particularly at the time that T-Bombs was getting going and as it thrived, First Street in particular was a bevy of activity. I mean, there were a lot of different places down there. Thinking back, what are some other places? Obviously, you mentioned 1890s, but some other places along there.
Curt worked at Walmart.
Well, Dave started expanding. Dave and Kim expanded. They had a bar called Opie's, and they also are the ones that put in Tazwells down around the corner. Let's see, like I said, 1890s, there was Phone 3 right next door that came in after T-Bombs did. Then, oh my goodness, they're going to kill me because I remember the places all the way down to almost the end of the street. There was a water hole down there at one time.
Up on First Street, Dave Music started
Hoopy Yahtzees.
Yahtzee's, the newer version, the one that was on First Street. And you worked down there for a little while, didn't you?
Well, kind of.
So helped him out.
Dave would want to go home and take a bath or a shower and come and get me. I was just a customer, and he'd come and get me to watch it. Then I'd see him about 2 or 3 days later. Talk of the town, I just saw it, and that's the one I was forgetting there.
Yeah,
and
Mike.
Then, of course, you had Jay Sutter's Mill and O'Reilly's down on where the paddy wagon is now. So there was Dave had he was a visionary in the sense that he wanted all the bars to do well. And a lot of people didn't understand that philosophy, but he knew that if all the bars were doing good, that would bring more people in for everybody. And he proved it true, because at one time, just about every bar on First Street would have a line on like Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night. There would be a line out of just about every bar. So,
a couple others mentioned there. Buddha Belly. I forgot about Buddha Belly.
Well, Buddha Belly went in where 1890s was.
Yeah.
Dave actually put Fat Cats in there.
Yeah.
Another one of and I sort of ran that for him for a while, the deli.
You mentioned it, and I think it's true. As we've talked about some of these different places this week, the one thing is that there were a lot of options for people once you got past the 60s and when it was pretty much specs and that was it. But there seemed to be a good I won't say camaraderie, but there wasn't as much rivalry or competitiveness among the bar owners as people would think, because as long as people keep coming, like you said, everybody wins if people keep coming.
That's true. I don't know how things change, when it changed. It's a natural order of things, I think. Everything has to change. But I don't seem to see that camaraderie. Of course, the bars are all spread out now. But back then, each bar had its own atmosphere. It had its own, it's a little different from the next one.
Yeah, there was something unique about them.
Yeah.
Most of the bar owners, they had bar hop. I know one to see what everybody else is doing, but you knew all the owners, and not just from being there. You sit there and talk and have a beer with them, and later on that night they'd come up, and so everybody wanted to do well, but there's never that much competition where there's any bad feelings among the bar owners.
Backbiting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, what was the policy for T-Bombs? And I know a lot of different places had different policies. Some of them you could get in if you were 18, but you couldn't drink unless you were 21. And then some were just straight 21 and older. How did T-Bombs handle that? Was it a 21 and older, or?
I'll take a fifth.
Actually, I think Dave did go to 21 pretty quick. 21 and over. I know when I first started going in there, you had to have a college ID to get in. And because he wanted to make it into a college bar, but he went to 21 and over pretty early on, the best I remember. Kim would know more about that than I.
Yeah, and you tried to be as sure everybody's old enough, but after a while you get, I know they're not old enough, but they come in here, and that was almost any of the bars.
Yeah,
just especially if there's 5 girls coming in and 1 guy, and the girl's too young. She's 18 instead of 19. You go, what did I do? But we got caught for that too, so we've got fined for that a couple times.
Every bar did. That's part of doing business.
That's exactly right. One of the things that I remember about T-Bombs, and this wasn't true, I don't think, of every bar downtown, but you could go into T-Bombs on a given Friday or Saturday night, and you would have a college crowd, you would have the 30s crowd, and you even had the older crowd, 50s, depending on what the band was and what the music was. You could have everything from college to 50 and 60-year-olds in there on any given night.
Everybody felt welcome there, and that's what we try. I say we. Dave tried. Kim tried. I wasn't an owner or anything, but that was the whole idea. Is just make a place where everybody felt welcome.
And how long, Kim? How long did T-Bombs last? When did it eventually shut down and close?
It didn't last long after Dave passed away. His widow took over, and she had no clue how to run a bar, and it didn't take long, and they just couldn't keep it open. And Ed Worley made them an offer they couldn't refuse, to be honest. And so Dave's three daughters got his part, and then she got way more than she deserved. So, but that's how. After that, it just T-Bombs wasn't the same. Dave made T-Bombs. I mean, just he started it, and he loved T-Bomb. He loved being there. That's what he wanted to do. So
pardon?
Go ahead.
He had a way. Anybody that walked through that door, most of them felt like he was their best friend. He just had a way of making you feel that way.
I can remember when Dave passed, word spreading through the community, and people like, it was tragic, and everybody was so sad. And what's going to happen to T-Bombs? That was the question a lot of people asking. Does this mean the end of T-Bombs? And eventually, I guess it did mean the end of T-Bombs.
Yeah, I'd already left, and when Dave died, it didn't take long for you. I'd still go up and see his daughters and everything. It was just going downhill quick. Not their fault, but it wasn't the same without Dave.
No.
Yeah. Now, your dad was in the bar business a little bit. Had he always been in the bar business? How did he get into it?
He's a bootlegger. I grew up in Estill County, and he had 3 bootlegging joints in Estill County, and he got all his beer and stuff out of what eventually came T-Bombs. It was just an old shotgun building, and he'd have old fishermen come in there. It's just good old boy's place, but that's where he'd buy his liquor and stuff for the places up in Estill County, and that's how we all got into the business. Going up to the wet and was the dry county. Just going up to the dry counties. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Tell a story about the dry counties.
Oh, you'd go up. I mean, I went to bars up on Tipton Ridge and places in Estill County that was better looking bars than we had in Richmond. And I'd go up there on Sunday when my dad would go up and get with the guy who was managing it for him, and check out the money, make sure. And he'd have one in Irving, and then he'd have another friend of his running one halfway between Irving and Lee County. That's how I was always around it. I had aunts and uncles at I was trying to think of their original name, but it's been what was those were out there on the other end of town, Red Barn and
Maverick one, Saratoga.
Yeah.
And my aunt and uncle was the original owners of those, and I remember going in there when I was 6 years old to my cousins. They had a birthday party in Saratoga on a Sunday
Yeah.
for her. You know,
Clay Nelson put in the Iron Gate out there.
Iron Gate.
One time was a fairly high-class supper club. That's what it was. It was a supper club. People got dressed and went in there and ate and had the red candles on the tables. And
so there was a lot of little bars came and went, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And downtown Richmond, a lot of people, I never heard of that place. But
oh, yeah. Well, Bear and the Bull was gone. A lot of people don't remember that. Tar Howard had it, and then Robin Knapp wound up.
Yeah.
Richmond.
Dirty Ernie's. Yeah, Dirty Ernie's.
Dirty Ernie's. You
Dirty Ernie's.
could get quart beer there, hamburgers and quart of beer. And, oh my goodness, boy, my mind is. How do I'm old, evidently. I'm just old to remember all this.
Been a while since all these bars.
Yeah.
It has. It really has.
And the downtown, and we've talked a little bit about this each night, the downtown scene has changed dramatically from the 80s and even the early mid-90s where, like you said, there would be on a given Thursday, Friday night, lines coming out of just about every bar in downtown Richmond. And obviously it's a different scene now. There are fewer spots for people to go to. And I think the students do more house parties than bar hopping tonight on nights now than they did back then. And I think that's part of what makes these memories so special for the alums and for people who grew up and were in Richmond during that time, because you just don't see it like that anymore.
Well, it's generational, just like anything else, just like music, fashion, taste in cars, everything is generational. I see these small cars that people are driving now, and, you know, they're saying, boy, that's fast, that's bad. And I'm thinking, go look at a 68 Chevelle, pal, if you want something bad, you know, that kind of thing. So, but there again, that goes back to the natural order of things. I think it's natural. The next generation, when we're gone, it'll be completely different for them too. So
I'm gonna wait for that generation. I ain't leaving.
Hey, Kim, let's open up another college bar in about 20 years. You want to?
I don't think I can afford that. Not
well, hey, listen. We had Billy Luxon on last night, and one of the things that Billy said, you know, I said, why did you get out of it? And he said, it's a young man's game. He said, I got to a point where I just couldn't keep the pace anymore.
Yeah, I got tired. That, my wife and 2 kids, that sort of slowed down.
A lot of people didn't know the day that Dave passed. He and I had lunch that day, and he had told me then that he was fixing to get out of the bar. He was going to take his wife and move somewhere and let the girls run it. And I remember telling him that's the best news I've heard in a long time, because I was too old to be down there.
Now, Curt, you're still playing music, right?
I'm well, till the pandemic hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still play. I play bluegrass music for a living. I've been playing locally more than I ever have. 2 reasons: partly because it's fun again. It was not fun for a long time, but yeah, I do that, and then I teach part time, and just I'm slowing down though. I'm 64, and it's time to. Of course, I never was real ambitious to begin with, so.
No, you're being hard on yourself.
Yeah, some folks are asking where you play and how they can catch seeing you play your music.
Well, I usually advertise it on Facebook wherever I'm going to be. I played last night at Vintage 18 and even had Les Taylor come by from Exile. Friday, I'll be at Elkhorn Tavern in Lexington with the Marble Creek Rangers, which is an eclectic mix of music there. So just check me on Facebook.
You know, one of the new trends in in the Richmond scene, well, I guess really everywhere, but it's starting to be more prevalent here in Richmond, is these microbreweries and these places. We've got several of them that have opened up in Richmond. It almost seems like that's the trend now, getting away from the bar scenes and more of these breweries.
I've been to Dreaming Creek. I enjoy that. I'm not a beer snob. There are several that I can drink and I will drink. I'm not big on IPAs, but there again, that's a whole different. You're right. Tastes change. Things change. It's supposed to.
Yeah. Does it surprise you that's kind of where people seem to be going now, or I guess it's just part of the, like you said, the evolution and the change?
I see it all over the country. Things happen on the West Coast and up north, and then it finally filters out through the Midwest and stuff. But at this point, really nothing surprises me anymore, because it's it's like, who would have thought we'd be watching 82-inch televisions, So
Very good point. Very good point. Let's turn our thoughts back to T-bombs. Obviously, that's our focus. And as you guys think back to the days of T-bombs and what made it special, what if you had to pick out a favorite memory or a favorite thing that happened there? Is there one thing that kind of stands out in your mind as a highlight or a big event?
We'd always have a big Christmas party at Christmas, and it wasn't private, but it was. We had all our bartenders and regular customers and friends, and they were never any trouble, and you go and just had a good time. And people would bring food, we'd bring booze, and it was always a good party. I mean, any problems at the Christmas party I liked, because you get to talk to everybody, not having to serve them, and it's just a good time. Just nothing going on, but everybody being buddies, and we all and everybody worried about how they're going to get a ride home, because everybody.
It really was a family atmosphere.
Yeah,
very much a family. We would more than likely get together on Sundays after the bars, after being at the bar all week, that kind of thing.
We have a question from somebody who's watching tonight and wanted to know how Tazwells got its name.
I can tell you that pretty easy. We were tearing out the building, getting ready to put Tazwells in there, and a newspaper fell out of the ceiling from like 1900s or something, real long time ago, and it was Tazwell. It was from Tazwell, Tennessee, and we left it laying there for 3 or 4 days. And Dave said, "Well,
we got our
that's
name.
what we're going to have to. That's how we named it. Just is an old newspaper." And everybody seemed to like it. Easy to say, I guess. That's where it came from.
So Tazwells, though, was not on First Street, but around the corner there, kind of where the jail is now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly where the new jail, and patio background on the back of that one, like we had T-bombs, and but we ended up losing that. Dave and I didn't really care much about Tazwells. It just didn't have the same feel that First Street had. People come over and I don't know, and so we sold it. So, and I don't remember who bought it.
Billy Puckett.
Curt Puckett, yeah.
Billy
Him and his brother
was the first one to buy it, and where it went from there, I really don't know.
Well, we're going to talk about that in our next segment, because Gabe Uebel eventually ended up with it, and I don't know where in the line of owners at Tazwells that Gabe was, but he had it at some point, and we're going to talk about that with him coming up in the next segment. So Well, I guess we got the beginning of Tazwells here, and we'll get the rest of the story, maybe the end of Tazwells when we get into our second segment. Somebody mentioned earlier Yellow Dye number 5, and I've enjoyed this week partly because there has been such a strong music history in the downtown Richmond area, even going all the way back to Specs. Any other music bands or memorable music acts that you guys remember who came through T-Bombs?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. Eric Cummins' band Mystery Train. Paul Martin had a band. Paul went on to take J.P. Pennington's place in Exile for a while, but he had a band called Jack and Irons, a little 3-piece heavy metal band. The best I remember, one of the first heavy metal bands that played in there. It's hard to name them all. It really is.
Yeah. Well, and it's been a few years, so it's not as easy to remember.
A week or two.
Yeah. And I think Phone 3 next door. Phone 3 was a little bit more of a heavy metal kind of bar, right?
They were, but they also
had Greg Austin in there.
Yeah, they would have Greg Austin. They had an eclectic mix. That they wasn't strictly heavy metal at all, by no stretch of the imagination. But there I see a calendar from T-Bombs where you have an eclectic mix there. Cracker Boys, I used to like them. Larry Redmond from Lexington played. There's been so many that's come through.
Yeah, Jimmy Buffett concert. Oh, Jimmy Buffett concert tickets. Okay, I was thinking for a minute that Jimmy Buffett was there. Well, and that's back in 1995.
That was a hard Saturday night when everybody come to town trying to get Buffett tickets, and all the bars were packed after the concert.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and obviously being in a college town played into a big part of the success of every place downtown. You had your instant crowd, yeah. There's some more examples.
Where have y'all found those on?
I think some of them are Eastern Progress ads from back in the day.
Oh, okay.
And others of them have been shared on some of the EKU websites and Facebook pages around. So we had a question, by the way, from one of our viewers who wanted to know why did everything on First Street get torn down? And I think one of you mentioned earlier that Ed Whirling eventually had bought out T-Bombs, and I think Ed eventually bought the whole block there.
From what I understand, he did. But Ed did wanted. And if you look behind me, there's 2 guitars up here.
Yep, I see them.
Right there, they over the bar, T-Bombs forever. And
so you took a little T-Bombs with you?
Yeah. I took several things with me when I left, but I was surprised because that wasn't something you'd give away because
No.
I think you and Dave went and picked those out, didn't you, Curt? Those 2 to put over. They were just ornaments over the bar.
I've got. I was asked if I wanted anything from there, and the only thing that I have, I went when they finally tore it down, and I got 4 of the bricks from the building, and I keep those in my back room. That's what I've got.
Going back to my dad when he had it, at the end of the bar where the coolers were, there was a big hanging down. It had a big train, and it was worth quite a bit of money, and it'd been there forever. Nobody had ever touched it. All the bars, glasses, and mud and thought I went down there to get, and it was already somebody had already got, and it was probably worth $1,000 just hanging there because my dad had it back in the '60s. Is something that he had that long. So, but it was a real nice piece. What Curt didn't
Yes, it was.
But
I'd
it's
like to
probably
find
worth
out
more.
where it went.
And I can't play a guitar, so they just hang there.
I give you strings for them every now and again.
Yeah, he'll tune them up, clean them, and hang them back up for me.
I was going to say, Curt could probably give you some lessons if you needed it.
Dave tried to do that. He just gave up. He said, "You better go play baseball or something."
Do you think when Dave first got T-Bombs and you got involved, did you guys ever think it would have the run that it would, and that it would be the big success and last as long as it did?
Dave probably did, but I had other things I wanted to do, but because I really enjoyed working there. I was 17, 18 years old. I thought I was the coolest guy around, the college bar. So,
Working the
but
door.
no, really, huh?
Working the door.
Yeah, work the door a lot. Best place to be.
At times. Little inside information going on here.
But it's I don't know. It was different. When I was working there, and I left for a while, and went in the Army, and then come back and was working with Dave. But it was cool. I was 17 years old, checking the door and talking to the girls and every I was running around above my age. I was 17. People supposed to be 21 to get in there. So it's a lot of fun back then. Well, it was fun when I was a grown man too. So.
Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for being with us tonight. We're just about out of time, and it's been great thinking back and having the memories of T-Bombs. And so before we wrap up, I just want to give you each an opportunity to share any final thoughts you have and memories, special memories of T-Bombs that you might want to say or share with the folks watching tonight. Kim, you can go first.
I met my wife at T-Bombs, so that's she'll probably appreciate that I did that. So, but I met
T-Bombs.
Curt there. What?
Yeah, Curt said he met your wife at T-Bombs too.
I'll tell her that. But I was going to say, it's good. I've met good friends like Curt, but I'll bypass that one.
No, you're right. The friendship is. Kim and I, of course, are still very, very dear friends. We just not that long ago. Well, I guess it's been a year now. Made a trip down to see two very special friends that we had met through the bars, Frank McKinney and my battery's running low, and Dwight Potter down in South Carolina. And the friendship would be the main thing for me.
Well,
let me tell you one thing. Stephanie, what was Stephanie's last name, Curt?
Griffey.
Stephanie Griffey, yeah.
That's her married name, yeah.
Yeah.
Stephanie Griffey. She was our best bartender ever. Is that right, Curt?
Yeah. No, she's a sweetie. She ran happy hour for a long time.
Yeah, she was a hoot. She was always funny. She wasn't.
I believe she was Berryman back in those days. I believe.
Yeah, Berryman. Yeah.
Yeah.
She. I just wanted to let her know we was thinking about her. She just popped up.
Well, it looks like Curt's battery finally went out on him, and just in time, we're wrapping up and at the end of the show. So, Kim, again, I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight and sharing your memories of T-Bombs and Dave and all the great times. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. That is Kim Billings and also Curt Chapman tonight joining us as we go back to the 1990s and remember T-bombs. Coming up next is going to be Tazwells. You just heard how Tazwells started. Well, Gabe Uebel eventually became one of the owners of Tazwells during the 1990s, and he's going to come on and he's going to tell us a little bit about his memories and some of his thoughts about Tazwells and the other action and some of the other night spots in downtown Richmond. Again, I want to remind you, if you're tuned in tonight, please go to our website and check in and let us know you're here. It's alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl. Go to that site, just fill out the form, won't take but 2 minutes, and let us know who you are and where you're from so that we know kind of all the different folks that are tuning in and listening. And also check out the vintage EKU Pub Crawl t-shirt. It's going to be a collector's item, a one-of-a-kind. It's got logos from all these different bars that we have been talking about this week on the back of the shirt. Be sure to go there. You can order one of those and join the crowd who will have those shirts. So we have a second segment that's going to be coming up in just a few minutes. Gabe Uebel is backstage, and he's going to come out and join me, and we will start talking about Tazwells and some other memories that Gabe has from his time as a student here at EKU. So stay with us. We're going to take a quick break, give you a chance to run to the restroom to maybe refill your drink. I've got my water here, and we'll be back in just a few minutes with segment 2 of tonight's show on downtown Richmond in the 1990s. All right, good evening. Welcome back. Sorry we took a little bit longer break than we usually do, but we're trying to get some technical issues straightened out, and we have got those all straightened out and ready to go. We want to welcome you back to our second segment tonight of the EKU Eternal Kernel Virtual Pub Crawl. My name is Dan McBride, and I will be your host for this segment as we continue our journey through some of the iconic night spots in downtown Richmond and some of the places that helped add to your EKU experience. We started in the 60s on Monday night, the 70s on Tuesday night. Last night, it was the Family Dog and Jay Sutter's Mill from the 1980s. And tonight, it's been the 1990s that we've been focusing on. The first hour was all about T-bombs and T-bombadils. And in the second hour, we're going to talk about Tazwells. But before we get to our guests here in the second hour, I want to remind folks who are tuning in, if you haven't registered yet, please go and check in on the website. That is alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl. alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl, and just check in, fill out a quick form, let us know where you are and that you're tuned in tonight. And also you'll have an opportunity there to purchase one of our classic EKU Eternal Kernel Pub Crawl shirts. Those are on sale there. You also will have an opportunity to make a donation to the university if you would like to do that. Also, if you're watching on Facebook Live, we want to remind you that we want you to be part of the show tonight. If you have a comment or a memory that you'd like to share, please put it in the chat. If you have a question or something that you want to ask and get into the show, feel free to put that in the chat as well, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. Here in segment number 2, though, we are going to turn our attention to Tazwells, and we are very fortunate that we have yet another EKU alum and one of the guys who owned Tazwells, and apparently the Tazwells has a pretty rich history. We're going to learn more about that here in this segment. We welcome to the show Gabe Uebel. Gabe, good evening and welcome. How are you, brother?
Hey, good evening, guys. Welcome, EKU Nation.
It's good to have you with us, Gabe. Obviously, you, as well as anybody, can remember all of the nightlife in downtown Richmond during your time as a student at EKU and then even beyond that. And we learned in the first hour something that I didn't know. Tazwells was actually opened up originally by the guys who did T-bombs, by
right.
Dave and Kim Billings.
That's exactly right.
So kind of walk us through how it ended up to eventually be a bar that you owned.
Sure. So there was a gentleman that was a beta, Russ Clark, who was president when I was president of Phi Kappa Tau. And that summer, Matt Chambers and Tony Basham were working at T-bombs, and there'd been a changeover in ownership. That would have been the summer of 1998, I believe. And we were lucky enough to be able to make the transaction happen. We ended up adding the cooler in the front and redoing the back patio. And with that, we opened that fall. And Russ should get most of the credit because he took care of all the inventory and running the business. And I just kind of came in and made sure that we had enough servers and everything else we needed to make sure we operated. But we had a great run there at the end. We owned it the last year and a half, almost 2 years that Tazwell existed before the city reclaimed it next to the jail there. So,
yeah, and is that how it eventually ended? The city claimed it as part of their construction of the new jail.
That's right. That's right. There had been when we took over ownership of the property, there had been, frankly, from what I understood, if the bond money had been there, we probably would have. That would have probably been the end of it. But we were fortunate enough to operate it for about a year and a half, and then, of course, at that point, there was a lot of transition downtown, as you're probably aware. And so at any rate, we had a great time during that year and a half, 2 year period.
Now, T-bombs obviously was on First Street, and we talked about that a little bit in the first segment. But Tazwells was one of those bars, one of those rare bars that wasn't on the main strip there in First Street, although it wasn't far away. Kind of talk about where Tazwells was and what was around it back then.
Sure. So as you said, Dan, right there, when we were down there, there was obviously Tazwells and Taylor's was there, and then Bottles, and then it changed hands a couple times. We actually sat directly behind the courthouse next to the jail. So if you were looking at the street level entrance, we would have been to the left. And then, of course, there on the immediate corner at the time was, I believe, a craft shop or something along those lines. But we were kind of hidden in the back, and it's a great location.
Was it warehouse sales? Was that what was in there back then?
I believe that's right.
Yeah, yeah. And for people who never went into Tazwells, and I'm sure most of the people who are watching tonight did go into Tazwells and probably went in there a lot, but kind of describe the scenery and the setting and what the decor and the feeling was when you go into Tazwells.
So it was a shotgun building, and as you entered in, obviously getting everybody in the door, there were restrooms on the left, and then the bar really spanned. I believe that building was about 80 foot in the interior. Of course, we had a little pool room in the back, and then the deck basically accompanied that on out. But the bar ran, I'd say probably 50, 60 feet of the length of the building, and to the left there was enough probably seating, or when we were busy, enough to get through a couple different aisleways. But I'm not sure that we upheld any of the fire standards at that time. But we on a normal, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, there were probably somewhere between 500 to 1,500 people in that establishment. It was, we like to say, you could have walked across the heads of the people in there to get the front to back. But if you're fortunate enough to get up to the front to be able to get a adult beverage, typically you grab the couple and pass them back to your friends. So it was quite rustic.
I remember it was a lot longer than it was wide.
That's right. That building was, and I wish that Russ could have joined us tonight. I believe that building was about 60 feet wide, but with the bar 8 or 10 foot, and then of course a few tabletops in there and such, it seemed like it was very narrow, 30, 40 feet, and the building ran all the way to the back. So I think we had about 120 to 150 feet run. But if you hadn't been in there, it was exactly what you would have imagined if a group of 22-year-old college students had the opportunity to put together their best rendition of a garage bar, and with good cold beer and loud music, and that was probably the extent of it. So there you go. We built that bar. Russ and his father built that bar, and really most of the fixtures that were in there when we took over, we just gutted the building and redid the bathrooms and put the crow's nest in, and where we could play music, and of course built the cooler in the front when you came in. So it was pretty rustic. So.
You mentioned a 22-year-old college kid. Had you graduated yet when you got into Tazwells, or were you still a student?
Well, I had finished my first degree in political science and had been working on my MBA at UK, and decided to come back to Eastern to finish a full accounting degree. So I was really in my 5th year, and Russ was just finishing up. I think Russ had just finished maybe in the summer when we connected, and neither one of us were ready to, I think, go back home and start adult lives. So we were blessed that his family helped him out, and of course my family helped me out a little bit. And then Dave had a big part in really just kind of making sure that we had connections with some of the suppliers that we needed, and he kind of hand walked things through for us, to be honest with you. So
when you were obviously thinking about your career, some of the people we've had on the show this week, they were in the bar business for a long, long time, but it never was. I'm guessing it never was a career aspiration for you. It was something fun to do, and you did it and made it the best while it lasted.
That's right. Both Russ and I, during the 90s, I think the folks around here, we all had just a fantastic time at Eastern, and appreciated all the relationships we built. And it seemed at the time like a natural progression for us to two groups that were very active on campus, got along great. To the best of my knowledge, I can't think there was ever a rift between us. In fact, a lot of our alumni still spend a lot of time together, Beta Theta Pi and Phi Kappa Tau. And so it seemed natural that that's what we would do as we were trying to wade our way into the real world. And to your point, Dan, neither one of us really had. My family had been in the bar and restaurant business in Cincinnati and Chicago and Miami, Florida, but I was the first male to go to college. So I got out pretty clean. And then I think Russ, similar situation, his family had owned a large furniture business, I believe, in Danville. And so we both came from a business background, but had never opened a bar. So.
Yeah, and I would say for both of you, this was the extent of your bar career was the Tazwells time.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
You mentioned you were both fraternity guys, and I think maybe there was a little bit of attachment to Tazwells with the Greek community. Obviously, that was some of your best supporters.
Agreed. Yeah, and and frankly, the football team and the baseball team, the guys that were there, helped us immensely. There was and this is how I think most of us kind of equated EKU during the mid '90s, early 2000. If you stayed on campus on the weekends, that was kind of its own fraternity, regardless of your affiliation with sports or whatever the case might be. It just seemed like that was the group that kind of hung out together and spent a lot of time together. We had a lot of help from, thankfully, from the football team for security, and a lot of the baseball guys were involved helping us as barbacks. And I think back about that time sometimes and think about how diverse really our student population was and how well we all got along. I mean, to this day, I still run into guys around the state, and they'll stop me or I'll stop them, and we all look a little different. We have a little more gray hair, but it's a great time to be at EKU.
Well, and that's funny because we have talked to a lot of the alums that we've had on this week, asking them to share a little bit about their Eastern experience. And I think you kind of just did that a little bit, but particularly in the 90s, I think that's a time when the Greek community was really strong. And when I guess that there was a strong camaraderie in the student body that maybe you don't see as much sometimes nowadays.
I think I've been involved. I've been fortunate to be involved with EKU really since I started as a freshman. I never really left. The eternal colonel, kind of like yourself, served in a couple different roles, but more importantly, have just been able to keep strong my ties to the university. Try to come back for homecoming, and so many of, I think for so many of us probably on the call tonight, so many of our friends. I met my wife the second week of college, and we've been married 20 years now and together 26. I don't think that's uncommon from our generation. A lot of us met our significant others in college. And so many of the people I've worked with in my different career paths have been EKU alum and grads and friends. And the Greek community was pretty unique in that, and I served for our national fraternity as a field resource guy when I left EKU. A year later after selling the bar. But it really, Martin Cobb was down there at that time. Martin served at Beta Theta Pi headquarters. We've had a number of guys, I could go on and on, that really came out of that era that led national organizations. And a lot of it was because, I think we kind of got the idea of what fraternity and sorority life was about. And it was something more than just a social organization, I think, for most of us. So.
Yeah, you mentioned your professional careers now, and I know you even still have been working a little bit with Phi Taus and helping do some guidance for them. But talk a little bit about what you've done since bar ownership and where your life and your career has taken you. Sure.
So I finished my second degree in accounting, and then went and worked for the state auditor's office in the general legislature for a short period of time, and then opened a financial planning firm in Cincinnati. We sold that group a few years later, and was really blessed to be able to kind of choose where Leanne and I would raise our family. We moved back to Central Kentucky. We live in Lawrenceburg, and I went to work for Yum Brands in Louisville and worked my way up to assistant controller. Worked in the accounting realm for about 6 years, and then started a marketing and advertising company, Splatter Inc. in Lawrenceburg, and we grew through 2018 to just near 80 locations across the Midwest, and ended up founding an insurance group and handled benefits for Toyota, Nissan, and Honda. And I've been really blessed in my life to be able to use both the marketing and advertising as well as the accounting skills to kind of grow my career. And just most recently, since 2018, I really, I think my wife likes to use the word dramatic pause, not retired, but I've been doing a lot of community service and leadership roles in our community with tourism and the chamber, and helping a number of our both sides of the aisle get elected in the state and House and U.S. Senate. So,
wow! So you've had an opportunity to do a little bit of everything. I mean, a pretty vast career experience since you left EKU. And again, we talk about it all the time, but that's part of what EKU does: trains you for the opportunity to do whatever you want and go anywhere.
That's right. That's right. Dan.
Let's talk a little bit about the downtown scene when you were a student. We'll talk more about Tazwells, but there were a lot of opportunities. You mentioned T-bombs, but as you think back about those times, what are some of the places that are iconic in your mind and that you remember
Sure.
being a part of the downtown scene?
Well, I don't think I'm different than a lot of the folks that hopefully are on this call tonight, because I'll feel odd if this is true. But we had a route that we went every week. So on Mondays, we probably tried to at least get to class and have a good time, and kind of catch up from the weekend. But Tuesday was down at Paco's was Taco Tuesday, and we would go down there. A lot of us, there were a number of us that worked in the bars or were around downtown a lot, and so Tuesday seemed to be kind of the employee day at Paco's. And then, of course, Wednesdays, most of us went to the Dog. I know that those guys were on earlier in the broadcast, and that was Wednesday was a big night there. And then Thursday night, you kind of had your choice, because so many of the students from UK and from, what's our school right down the road there? At any rate, several of the colleges came in on Thursday night.
Berea.
Yeah, gosh. And so, you had the normal crowd that was out, which was pretty strong. And I don't want to exaggerate, but it seemed like that I think there were about 15,000 students at the time at EKU, somewhere 15,000. And it seemed like 6,000 or 8,000 were out downtown on any given Thursday night. And so, you might duck into Tazwells or T-bombs if you were able to get in. Most of the bars had a waiting list by 8, 9 o'clock. If you weren't inside one of the bars, you probably weren't getting in, and you probably were trying to find somewhere to go. Of course, Sutter's was still up and running. And then, as the night kind of carried on, I say this to I have a 17-year-old, and there's a lot of young guys that I kind of mentor. At midnight, we were headed home. The bars weren't open until, with the exception was with the time change. You were out the door, and you were probably headed home. I think occasionally there would be some type of a after party down at the Cherry Pit, I think is what it was called. But most everybody was headed back to their to their dorms or to their house off campus living. And, most parties were wrapping up, I think 12:30, 1 o'clock at night. And after that, I think you had to deal with the local PD. I don't think they were very happy to have us out much later than that, but that was plenty. The days of, as I've gotten older and moved around the country, I think most of us have been in some big cities where you don't go out until 11, 12 o'clock at night, and you stay out till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and you're not much count the next day. It was just a different time. Midnight was time to go home. So totally great environment, but it seemed to be pretty organized at some level.
It's funny because I remember when the city of Richmond finally passed the ordinance that said on home football games that are night games, the bars were allowed to stay open till 1 a.m.
Right.
And everybody acted like it was such a big deal, but you noticed that around midnight, people still, because that's what they were used to doing. Yeah,
that's
there were
right.
some who hung around, but for the most part at midnight,
right,
they would move on. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it just sparked a memory. We were right next to the jail. I can't be any more clear. If you know where the jail's at, and those guys, I forget the jailer's name at the time, but he was a great guy. Most of the city police and the county police and even state police, there was a lot of, being on EKU's campus, there was a lot of support. How's that local support? Those guys were great. The years that Russ and I had the establishment Tazwells, 11:30, 12 o'clock, we were having last call. And at 12 o'clock, we'd ask everybody to leave, and it was pretty orderly leaving. There was very little problem that I recall, very few exception. And I can't tell you how many times that, the next morning we'd be up, cleaning up, getting set up on Saturdays or whatever it would be midweek for inventory. And those guys would mosey through and just, and Dave I wish Dave was with us still. He could definitely testify to this, how much cooperation there really was between the city and the county, and then our campus. I'm not going to say that there weren't incidents that occurred occasionally, but for the most part, it was a lot of cooperation there. We didn't have much trouble. Yeah, that's a great picture. Is that a homecoming, Dan?
Yeah, that's one
Yeah.
of our homecoming floats from back in the day. And you talked about it. I think and I'm not saying it's not still true today, but I think there was a feeling that everybody's safety was the first priority. And so the bar owners working with the city and the county and the police and whatever, that was everybody's first priority. Have a good time, but let's do it safely.
That's right. That's right. And so many of the students, I'd count myself in this, even at the time we were operating Tazwells, walked home. I don't know how to say it, but there wasn't there. I think there was, at least as I recall it, there was so much emphasis put on, you're not going to drink and drive. There's no parking anyways downtown. If you recall, there was none. And everybody that lived on campus made that walk home, and with a lot of safety. And then of course, most of the people that lived around downtown, of course, walked home too. So when the bars closed at midnight, it was kind of like a big concert venue getting out. Everybody was walking down Main Street or up Main Street or of course cross campus. So by 12:30, 1 o'clock, most people were soundly wherever they decided to go that night. So
yeah, there were those couple of main thoroughfares back to campus, Collins Street and
right.
I guess, 2nd Street, and a couple of those places that were always pretty busy. Let's get back to Tazwells for a second. Were there any drink specials or famous drinks, things that, like Tazwells was famous for this drink or that drink? Were there things like that you remember?
Well, we had some really creative folks that worked our bars over the years. And so I'd like to say there was something that was more famous than the others, but it seemed like every, especially on Wednesdays, we had spin the wheel. So wherever the wheel landed for that hour, that's the cost of mixed drinks or draft. What were some of the Three Wise Men? What were the, of course, Boilermakers? I'm trying to think. There were several that these concoctions that these guys would make up in pitchers, and then that would be the we didn't have any hostess going around really, or shot girls. It would just be something that was at the bar. I'm thinking that Kamikaze it just comes to mind. I think it was an inexpensive drink, and I think they were 50 cents or 75 cents for a shot. And Dan, most of the beverages, were $1 draft. I think pitchers were $2.50, $3. Of course, we had the smaller pitchers. We didn't have the big six glass pitchers. And so much of what we sold were in those plastic cups because you would pretty much at the end of the night, when we closed it down, you had to take a push broom and just push it all to the back and then shovel it up with. I can't tell you how many people were in that place during, and there was nowhere to go. So you had your drink and get the next one, and you probably put that cup on the floor and stomped on it and moved on. It was just, it was crazy. I think some of the nights that were our biggest were that fall that we reopened. I remember looking at Russ and saying, "Hey, somebody get to the cash registers because we can't close the cash registers." There was so much cash. Of course, there were no credit cards then. We didn't have an ATM machine, and everything was cash. It was like, Russ, somebody get to the cash register. The bartenders, we'd have 6 or 8 guys back there, couldn't close the drawers. And so Russ or myself would go through and, stuff as much as we could in bags in our pockets and try to keep them moving. And that might have been 2 or 3 times a night. It was very busy. Yeah,
I was going to say, I don't think anybody's going to feel sorry for you that their cash registers were so full you couldn't get them closed.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to be clear. Everything was like $1, right? Or $2.
Yeah.
So, you weren't dealing with a bar tab every time you bought a round of $25 or $30 or $100 or $200 now that you might deal with. I think a round of drinks might have been $5, or $6. So it's pretty affordable.
Obviously, there's big crowds there. Thinking back, what do you think it was about Tazwells that made it so popular that here we are 20 years later still talking about it? What do you think it was that brought that crowd in and made it such the iconic place that it is?
Well, it was definitely the patrons that came in. You hit on this earlier. It certainly was a big place for a lot of the fraternities and sororities and our athletic teams to get together. it was really laid back, right? So there was no pomp or circumstance. And I think that with the fact that there was considerable room, we didn't have a whole lot of high tops and tables to sit at. And I think the pool tables in the back helped. And then the patio, when it was, when it wasn't too cold or raining, people loved to be back there, and we'd have bands. And we certainly didn't have the layout that T-Bombs had. We were pretty limited in the space in the back, but I think it was really laid back, and everybody was really just excited to get together and have a drink together. And everybody seemed to get along pretty well. I don't think there was ever any turf wars. It was just, the girls made it what beautiful women and inexpensive drinks. I don't know what more you could ask for. So.
What about live music? Was live music a piece of Tazwells?
Absolutely. Redmond, that ended up opening Redmond's up in Lexington, came and played a lot on Tuesday nights. We tried, even before us, the time that Russ and I had it, the reputation had already been built. The traditions had already been established. To be frank with you, all we really needed to do was make sure we had cold beer and the door was open and people were in there. However, Russ was creative. He was bringing in groups on the Tuesday nights and the Wednesday nights. Larry Redmond played. We had a whole lot of local guys and gals that were in the Greek system and elsewhere that came in, and they do acoustical sets. And we always had, it seemed like something Snoop Dogg or something probably on the radio. If they weren't playing, there was always some type of music in the bar. But absolutely, Dan, there was certainly we didn't have the set that Bottles had, and certainly later that Dave had at T-Bombs, where he actually had a stage effectively there. But we had a lot of acoustic groups come in and play.
Yeah, there's this Exquisite Fashion who had their album debut party there, and I do not remember Exquisite Fashion.
I don't either.
That may have been during your days. It may not.
So, Dan, do you have a date on when we got involved in the late '90s, and I was there as a student, '94. Seemed like to me that Tazwells had been there. Is that early '90s? Is that right? Late '80s?
Yeah, and I asked Kim Billings, who was on with us in the previous segment, and Kim didn't give me an exact year, but he said it was a little bit after they had started T-Bombs and opened T-Bombs. Okay. They decided to do Tazwells, and then he kind of started going through who had it next and then who had it next. And so I think it probably went through a couple of hands before it got to you.
Did he share the story of how we got the name Tazwells?
He did, but
yeah.
Please share it again.
I'm probably paraphrasing, so I might not get exactly right, but my understanding is when they were remodeling the first time, it was a feed store, something along those lines. There was all this old newspaper that was stacked into the walls as you would use for insulation or whatever they had at the time. And Tazwell, Tennessee was one of the papers that was in there. And so that, I think that just stuck. That's what Russ shared with me. That was the story I was given. So.
Yeah, that's pretty much what Kim said in the first hour. He said they were tearing part of the roof out one night and a newspaper came down and it was from Tazwell, Tennessee. And he said it laid on the floor there for 3 or 4 days. And finally, Dave just looked at him and said, I think we found our name. It's going to be Tazwells.
There you go.
And it's funny how things like that happen and a name. And for whatever reason, the name kind of fit. It kind of worked.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I was going to say the other interesting thing about Tazwells was that, the crowd at that time was really a Wednesday so, but really Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Obviously, everything was closed on Sundays, and those were the days that we really ramped up for inventory and everything else. Russ, and I hope Russ is on the call tonight. And Russ, if you are, had a great time working with you and a lot of great memories. I know he did inventory on Mondays and Tuesdays, and I remember commonly joking that why even open? Really it was the Thursday, Friday, Saturday crowd that made the operation work. So.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say it was the same story everywhere downtown. Mm-hmm. Monday, Tuesday, and later I think Wednesday started becoming a night because, the Richmond crowd, the EKU crowd started going on Thursdays because they would come in from out of town on Friday and Saturday, and so many out of towners would come in that it moved to Thursday, and then even eventually started bleeding back into Wednesday for the EKU crowd.
Yeah, it just was. I mean, I can't even put into perspective for if there's any younger folks on the call how lively downtown was and how vibrant it was. The entire campus, really, from Walters all the way up to where First Street and Tazwells and there on Main Street, Sutters. Everybody kind of had a different flavor, a different opportunity, a different environment, but everybody was out. I mean, it was. Man, I don't know. It seemed like there were tens of thousands of people out on a common Thursday, Friday, Saturday, especially if it was a home football game. It was a huge crowd, and a lot of folks would walk from Roy Kidd Stadium all the way to downtown. And similar for homecoming. Homecoming would happen that Saturday morning, and we'd have Bloody Mary breakfast. That's something that was a tradition with us and several of the places. And then as soon as homecoming took over or had the parade, everybody would follow it out to the Coliseum parking lot and tailgate from 10 a.m. until 2-3 o'clock, if I recall, game time, and then walk back to downtown. It's quite an escapade. So.
Yeah, I was working in athletics back then, and we were always frustrated that we couldn't get them to walk into the stadium before they walked back downtown. Yeah. Unfortunately, we got our share of students too. But and one of the things too, I think that's important to mention is that obviously a lot of people were there to get drinks and to drink, but it wasn't. I mean, there were other things. It wasn't all about the drinking and getting drunk and whatever. It was there was an atmosphere of socialness, and the live music certainly played a part of that.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of folks enjoyed playing pool. We had a lot of, Tuesdays there for quite a while, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, that was our really serious pool playing crowd, right? So they come in and hang out and put quarters on the table and hang out. And I think for a lot of folks, other than those 9 to midnight, most everyone just came in and had a good time and spent some time together. And it was a local place for folks to get together. There's a whole lot of stories out there, and I'm not a great storyteller, but a lot of folks would come back on a random Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and they knew that they didn't have to even make a phone call. They would just come to one of the local establishments, and everybody was there, all their fraternity brothers or sorority sisters. And it really, at that time, there were very few groups that had large off-campus houses. Most of the housing, most people lived on campus till you're 21. I'm sure everybody on the phone recalls that. Few of us got around that, but very few. And then really by the time you had that last senior year or later part of your junior year, you were in, a duplex or a small off-campus apartment. There weren't the type of housing available now by any stretch. And you just didn't have the room to have back, 50, 100 people. So your real opportunity was to go out at Thursday night and visit some folks. And most folks ended up at Taylor's, getting a burger on the way home and sitting and having a soda and hanging out. I mean, to your point, it wasn't just the drinking. I think it was a lot of just the spending some time together, some good time together.
The social aspect of it.
That's right.
We had somebody last hour who commented the homecoming tradition was go to the game, go to Ma Kelly's, and then go downtown. And that's right. What a lot of people did. And I can't even remember when Ma Kelly's closed, but I think it was still open into the 90s, was it, until late 90s?
Yeah, I was going to say, and I was thinking like 97, 98, if I recall, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I don't exactly remember either. Well, Gabe, we appreciate you spending some time with us tonight and talking about it, and certainly everyone that Tazwells is one of those, for whatever reason, that when we brought up the pub crawl to people, boom, Tazwells was a name they immediately popped out, and I think partly because they picked a great name because it does stick with you. It's one of those names that's easy to remember, but I think just a lot of people had great memories there and remember a lot of good times there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, hey, Dan, thanks for having me on. And hopefully I captured the essence of the good times we had, and certainly look forward to seeing those that are on the call tonight at homecoming this year. And are we going to be virtual this year? Or what's
we're going to be virtual this year.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to be on campus, but we're going to do some virtual events. And this was part of our kickoff to homecoming.
Good.
And we'll do some follow-up programming with the pub crawl on homecoming week. But everybody can watch the game online and watch some of the festivities online. And
Right.
then hopefully next year we'll be able to get back together in person.
Well, let me at least give a plug for the campus, guys. If you haven't been back to EKU in the last couple years, bring your kids, drive through, take a detour. It's worth poking around. There's been substantial improvements across the entire the footprint of EKU. The students are much the same as we were at in terms of very diverse, big population of Kentucky first generation students that are there, and it's an incredible environment that the Board of Regents and our leadership at the university's put together. It's worth stopping and coming back and checking it out. So hopefully we'll get through this COVID quickly and be able to really enjoy the new footprint there on campus, Dan.
Great. Gabe, again, thank you very much. We appreciate you being with us and talking about Tazwells, and hopefully we'll get to see you in person soon.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
All right. That's Gabe Uebel. Gabe was as we learned tonight, one of several owners of Tazwells over the years, originally opened up by Dave and Kim Billings, the same guys who had T-Bombs, and then eventually Gabe and Russ were able to take it over and had it until the building was eventually taken down to make room for the new jail. Again, we appreciate all of you who have joined us tonight and all week long for our virtual pub crawl. We want to make sure that we know that you were here. So stop by our page and check in with us at alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl. Also, you'll find the EKU t-shirt there from the pub crawl, which is a limited edition collector's item t-shirt with logos from all the bars that we've been talking about this week, and the Eternal Colonel Pub Crawl logo on the front. I do want to remind you to join us tomorrow night. It'll be our last night of the pub crawl, and we will venture into the 2000s and talk about the last 10 to 20 years and what downtown has been like. We'll feature a couple places tomorrow night, and the only place that is still open that we are going to feature, other than the Magic Moment, is open on weekends that we had on Tuesday night. But the only place that's still open is the Paddy Wagon in downtown Richmond. We're going to have Chuck Fields and Silas Smith from the Paddy Wagon. They will be with us in our first segment tomorrow night, starting at 7 o'clock. And in the second segment, we're going to talk about jerseys. And we've got Myantha and Bryson and Wags will be on in the second segment with us tomorrow night to talk about jerseys. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope that you will come back and join us. I hope that you'll go to the page and let us know you were here and check in. And that will wrap things up for us tonight here on the Eternal Colonel Pub Crawl. Until tomorrow night, I'm Dan McBride, and thanks for watching.
Wish you were different, it ain't my choice.